From Music for All and presented by Yamaha, it's Mind the Gap, a practical web series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, from Fayetteville, Georgia, Marcus Broadhead. From O'Fallon, Illinois, Melissa Gustafson-Hinds. From Kennesaw, Georgia, Charles Jackson. From Austin, Texas, Gabe Musella. Tonight's conversation moderated by Susan Smith and David Starnes. Please welcome Susan Smith and David Starnes.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our series, Mind the Gap. And tonight we'll focus strictly on the local school level interview. If you were with us last week, you know that part 1 of the series was about making that first step toward application and having the very first interview at the local school level, whether that be with an HR person or whether that be with an art supervisor. And tonight we've passed the first level of interview, and we are now sending our applicants out to the local schools and will participate in that level, which is a completely different process than the first level process. Again, my name is David Starnes. I'm the Director of Athletic Bands at Western Carolina University in Cullowhee, North Carolina, and was a public school educator at the elementary, middle school, and high school level for 22 years before I moved into the collegiate level of things, and I serve as an education consultant for Music for All. I'd like to introduce my counterpart in terms of the moderators tonight, and thank you so much for being with us again. Please welcome Susan Smith.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. We're very passionate about young teachers and new teachers wanting to stay into an area that we love so much in teaching music education. As he said, my name is Susan Smith. I teach music education at Troy University. I've taught at every level in the educational world, from general music to guitar to now at the collegiate level. I was the director of bands at St. James School in Montgomery, Alabama. So I've had the opportunity to teach at both private and public school. And as well, I'm an educational consultant for Music for All. We are very excited about the panel that we have with us tonight, and we're going to give them the opportunity first to introduce themselves, and then we're going to kind of ask them to their ideas and thoughts on some of these questions as we move into the interviewing area. So we'll start with first tonight, Dr. Marcus Broadhead, who's the principal at Bennett's Mill Middle School in Fayetteville, Georgia. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. As you just said, my name is Marcus Broadhead, principal of Bennett's Mill Middle School. I've been in Fayette County for 15 years, going to my 16th year. This is my 22nd year in education. I did 6th through 12th grade and was a professor, adjunct professor at St. John's University in New York, and been in administration for 9 years, going to my 10th year.
Fantastic. As well, we have Dr. Melissa Gustafson-Hinds. She's the director of bands at O'Fallon Township High School in Illinois, the famous TARP band. Sorry. I think you're muted. I think you're muted, Melissa.
All right, there we go.
Covered the entire football field with a tarp. So that's
right. No tarp here. The tarp is gone, just so everybody knows, so that is clear. But I am in the O'Fallon Township High School band room, where I'm the director of bands. I have been teaching here for 13 years, and I've been teaching a total of 27. It's amazing how fast the time goes when you're doing something you absolutely love. So once again, I'd like to thank Yamaha and Music for All, and David Starnes, and obviously you, Susan Smith, my dear friends, for having me tonight. I'm super excited about being here.
Wonderful. We're so glad you're here. As well, we have Dr. Charles Jackson, or as I said, my husband calls him Mr. Fix-It, Mr. Gadget, because he's got a gadget for everything. He's teaches music education at Kennesaw State University in Georgia, but also was a middle school band director for many years. Chuck, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Good evening, and thanks for having me this evening. This is my 42nd year as a music educator. I served 34 years as a director of bands at the middle school, high school, and junior high school level, and did marching band for 8 years. Most of my experience was in Cobb County for the past, my last 28 years before I retired. I retired in 2013, and since that time, I've been an assistant professor of music at Kennesaw State University, where I cover all the woodwind and brass methods courses, and I also conduct an adult community band called the Cobb New Horizons Symphonic Band that rehearses on the campus of Kennesaw State University. So I've worked with students to the middle school level all the way through senior adults up into their 90s, and I'm still enjoying it.
Wonderful. Very similar at those ends of the spectrum, I imagine.
Yeah.
As well, our final panelist this evening, last but not least, is Mr. Gabe Musella. Not only is he the UIL Assistant Music Director, but he's a well-known composer, especially for those of you who do those sight reading things in UIL and across the country. Gabe, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I'm in my second year at the UIL. I taught high school and middle school band here in Texas for 30 years. And I also write a little bit. And my main job at the UIL is to head up our PML, which is managing over 20,000 titles that's on that list. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're going to jump right in this evening. And what we asked each panelist to do was trying to think beforehand of maybe 2 topics that they really wish for every interview that might be essential, things that they wish that someone had told them, or from their experience that maybe some things that people kind of stumble on. And we are going to be going to Dr. Broadhead a lot tonight, just as the principal, because I think we all think that he gives a unique experience, brings it to all of us as music teachers. But we'll just start with you and just kind of go around the room in the same order to Melissa, then Chuck, then Gabe, and then we'll throw it back to David after that. So tell us about 2 essential things you think, Dr. Broadhead, that might be important for every interview.
Well, the first thing,
You're at home.
first thing is to yell at your kids to be quiet. That's the first thing you need to do. What I've come to learn is that no matter what whatever interview you go into, you're always going to leave with regrets. You're always going to come out like, I wish I did this, I should have did that. You're always going to feel that way. That never leaves. So what I've learned is that if you go into it saying, I'm just going to be me, I'm going to be the best me that I can be, I'm going to present myself in terms of my character and share my genuine thoughts and not try to be someone else, that's a good way to approach it, because no matter what, you're always going to second guess, did I get the right answer? Did I do this? Did I do that? It's never going to be perfect. And even times when you feel like, oh, I nailed it, and you don't get the job. So it's always bigger than you, but it's always about you at the same time. So as you go into it, anytime you go into an interview, don't overthink it. Be you, and definitely don't stress over trying to make the right answer. You know, that's one thing I think I've learned. The only time that I felt the principal position actually that I received, I went into it when I said I'm going to be myself, because if they hire me, I know they want me, and if they don't hire me, good, because they didn't want me, and all I can be is me after they hire me. So those are the things I think that if you really sit in yourself and say to yourself, okay, let me present the best self that I can be, no matter what the outcome is, then you can live with it.
Fantastic. Melissa?
Yeah, I'm going to tag on that. And that's one thing that I was going to bring up, which I think sometimes is hard to do. You know, you're wanting to be impressive and have all your thoughts clear and everything, but you just, got to breathe and be yourself. Because it is true with what Dr. Broadhead said is they are hiring you, and you want to be true in the interview and true to yourself. So I think tagging on that, I would say, think of the interview as kind of a two-way street. Have some questions planned of things that you've already investigated within the district. Obviously be knowledgeable of what their program is. And so it's almost more like a dialogue, and think of it as a discussion back and forth instead of them just asking you questions and then you're bringing the information back. But think of it as a two-way street, and that might make you a little more comfortable. And then on top of that, I would say within your answers, as much as you can, be engaging with the conversation instead of just having quick, short answers and nothing to tag on. But that also ties into you being educated on what the position is and the past history of the program and what it involves, and do your skills match the program as well. So yeah, I agree completely. As number one is probably be yourself, which I think is a huge challenge, and it probably takes a little practice to do that, but also be engaging and think of the interview as a conversation back and forth.
Thank you. Chuck?
I think it's important for the participants to take note when they hear something repeated by each panelist that it must be very important, because we prepared our answers separate from each other. But I had two topics I wanted to bring up that I think are essential for interviewing. One of them is to make sure you do your homework and research the school that you're applying for. Know as much as you can about the program, so you can tell the person interviewing you how you plan to take that program from where it is now and help it grow into the future. You can't have a plan in mind unless you know the current status of the program in the community. Also, try to find out some information, not just about the community and the school, but about those interviewing you. Social media is a great place to go to get some background information and about interest of the people that are interviewing you. My brother's a dentist in Florida, and he does that for new patients. He'll look on their website and try to find out what they like. And while he's got them in the office, he'll just bring up a topic, and all of a sudden they think, hey, we got a little cordial going. So know some things about the community and the people interviewing you. It's so easy now with social media. The second thing on my list, again, is be honest and be yourself while you're trying to convince the interviewer that you're the best person for the fit for those students and for the needs of the community. And again, it's easy to be yourself, like Dr. Broadhead said, because once you get the job, you're going to be yourself. And you don't want the principal or those interviewing you tell you at some future date, well, thought you were completely different than what you turned out to be. So if you're just honest, be honest and upfront with who you are, and they will appreciate that, and they can see through it. If you don't know the answer to a question, like Dr. Broadhead said, then tell them you don't know that answer, but you'll find the answer somehow. So be honest, and I think that's important. So far, 3 of us have mentioned that same thing: be yourself and be honest.
Excellent. Gabe?
Well, I'll be the fourth one to say be yourself. So much so that I think in the middle of being myself, I think I talked them out of hiring me on at least 2 occasions that I can think of, which turned out okay. I think slow down. Sometimes when you're young and you're energetic and you want to show how bright you are and how energetic and what a go-getter you are, we tend to fly through things, and I find myself thinking at times, I wish I'd have just relaxed a little more and slowed down, maybe measured my responses and not been so quick to jump. And I still have that issue, I just want to pop in and start talking, So slow down and just try to take it all in. Research, I think this was said already, research the program that you're going into, because certain needs, every school is unique to its own needs. And so that's going to be true of everything that goes on at that school. So know what you're getting into.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna take this and run a little bit different direction with it. And we've broken this up for our participants tonight into 2 different areas, a principal's perspective as well as a music educator's perspective. And the first section of this, we're gonna really gear toward Gabe and Dr. Broadhead, just for the simple fact that you would be interviewing with a principal or an administrator of some type. Chuck, I'd love for you and Melissa to help feedback as if you were sitting in that interview, listening to a participant interview, and how you could help lead the conversation as a band director, as a music educator sitting there. Dr. Broadhead, I want to ask you first, because I know Gabe's background, but do you have a music background as an administrator or a teacher?
No, I was an English teacher.
Okay, so participants, that's important to know, and you're lucky to get an English teacher. If you get a previous coach or something like that, that goes all kinds of sideways. So this is great that you would have an English teacher. And nothing to say anything about athletics, but that's a different kind of interview, and we've all had those kinds of interviews. So this is really for Gabe and for Marcus, but also for Chuck and Melissa to feedback on just some points here. First of all, discuss how a candidate for a music education position can assist you in prompts to be able to lead the conversation in the direction that you want it to go, because there's nothing more uncomfortable than trying to get them to speak in the subject matter or down that pathway that you want them to speak at, if it doesn't go that way or you can't draw that out of them. How can a candidate help create that two-way street, that dialogue between yourself and themselves, to create even a second tier of conversation?
What's interesting about your question, I had to think about it a lot, because the structure of interviews almost don't lend itself to that. Depending on the position, it doesn't allow an interviewee to have kind of a back and forth banter, because of you try to be fair in asking questions that everyone gets. And if you don't if you allow it to be conversational, everyone will get the same questions. So there are times where you may ask an extra question to get more out of it. So more than likely, I'll be asking more questions. So I'll ask a question directly. They give a response to that question, and it may be too short or it may not be full enough. And then I'll say, well, can you talk to me a little bit further about that experience you just talked about? Just go a little bit more in depth about what that experience was like. And so how did you react to that situation, or so on and so forth? And then they'll then expound on it and give me a little bit more. So it's pulling more from the initial response within the confines of the question. So what I would suggest is to be prepared with experiences to support your answer. So as you answer the question, think about the time when, because if you could think about the time when, you'll provide the descriptions that's needed. You'll also provide, whether you realize it or not, you'll provide the emotion that we're looking for in how genuine your response is to a scenario. Because if it really happened versus a practice answer, then your mind will go to that place, and you'll start to, especially if it's about relationships. So as you talk about those instances and you talk about those interactions, you'll smile more, you'll show emotion in your face about that interaction, and provide a rich response that'll help me to understand what it really was like for you based upon that question, or what the extent of knowledge that you have about whatever the context is. In most cases, when when candidates come in for an interview, we ask that they provide music in advance. So that is also a means or a gateway for conversation as well. So you could refer to the music that you submitted, or refer to a video that you submitted, or a performance that you've done. Talk about those particular times, and then expound on those particular times as it relates to students' experiences, and other ways in which you were able to handle whatever the question was asked of you. So I think that way, to be vivid in remembering those real times when, will make for a smoother conversation, and it'll make for more interest. I know you mentioned, Melissa mentioned about being engaging, and that's where the engagement part comes from, to refer to those examples or those things that you brought into the interview to talk about. What I would caution you not to do is have this huge binder and then put it in front of us and say, hey, and then you start whipping out this binder and carry on. You're better off to do anything prior to it than whipping out your binder. I hate to say it, if you're coming out of college, there are a lot of programs that ask you to do your portfolio in your binder. In most cases, I'm not reading it. I'm not looking through it. I'm just looking at the music that you asked me for and your resume. So just be mindful of that as well.
That's a fabulous answer. Yeah, that's just, I think you answered like 4 of my questions coming up. So thank you. Great answers. Gabe, I know you've interviewed not only assistant band directors, you've interviewed high school band directors, middle school band directors. Kind of take us through what you look for when that music ed candidate walks in.
Well, before I answer your question, David, I want to thank Marcus for saying that the portfolio that you've done in college really means not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. I appreciate that, because I think there's a lot of time spent on trying to present you a product. Here, I'm going to sell this to you, as opposed to engaging the person that you're interviewing with. And so to that, getting a feel for, I was lucky enough in my situation at Spring High School that I got to sit in on the hiring of my middle school teachers on other campuses and their assistants. And I recall one time in particular where a young lady was interviewing for a middle school assistant's job, but her real passion was marching band. Well, that's available to you, but your main thrust in this job is going to be here at this middle school. So talk to me about that. And anyway, getting her to open up about that, and as Marcus stated earlier, we get to peer into that person's personality as they talk to us about their experiences and what they plan on bringing to the program. And in this case, it worked out. Her name was Tabitha Cooper, David. She says hello. And a former student of David's. Yeah, I'm interested in the kind of the personality that the energy that this person's going to bring to the job, and how they're going to gel not only with the staff at the middle school, but how they're going to gel with the staff at the high school. So it was all relationship driven. It was all what are you willing to do? What is it that we can expect from you? And you know, most of the time it worked out fine. Occasionally it didn't. You know, occasionally somebody was somebody in that interview, and then we hired them, and then they were somebody else, and that happens.
Thank you very much, Gabe. And shout out to Tabitha. Yeah, happy to hear that she did well out there. So Chuck and Melissa, you guys have sat in interviews, I'm sure. I know you've been asked by principals following interviews what your thoughts are. What are some of the triggers that you see and prompts that you feel like students lose the opportunity for in those interviews, that they could help better sell themselves or promote themselves or take the interview down a certain pathway that would be beneficial to both the principal and the music educator?
I noticed Marcus mentioned something about how he has to sometimes pull information from the candidate because the answer is too brief. I've also seen in interviews where the candidate will go on and on and on with their answer, and you want to make sure that as the candidate, you give the interviewer an opportunity to do follow-up and to again have a conversation during the interview. Don't make the principal interrupt you to ask the next question, because again, they're on a tight schedule. They have a lot to do, and they're trying to cover as thoroughly as they can everyone's interview. As far as the portfolio is concerned, usually a large portfolio or resume is what got you in the door for this interview to begin with. That's already been done. So if you take anything, and again, they're not going to want to read it while you're there. A single sheet of a summary for maybe someone who didn't get a copy of it, fine. But again, all that work is done up front before the personal interview. One of the Music for All representative is going to send the participants a link that I submitted to her. It has a list of 80 questions that my recent students submitted to me from questions asked of them this past spring during their interviews. And as Gabe and Marcus mentioned, most of the questions are about the person, personality, and relationships. 26% of the 80 questions I collected were about personality and their personal reflection of who they are and what they do. So that's the main point at this face-to-face interview. They're trying to find out who you are, and again, give them a chance to do follow-up questions, and don't go on and on like I just did, and keep them from asking more questions.
Great, Chuck. Melissa, do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, I'm going to probably reiterate what some things have already been discussed, but I would say before you go into the interview, make sure you're knowledgeable of what the program is, history, and maybe also do some digging as what they might be looking within the position. And then have this maybe written down in your notes, or have practiced saying it, or your thoughts on how does your personal experience tie into the program, strengths and weaknesses, or I've done a concert very similar to this, or I play this instrument but have experience in all these other things, or I know someone that could be a great resource for the program. Just different things that would maybe put you ahead of other candidates or make you a little bit different and tie into the program. So even if you're a first-year teacher, what was unique about your clinical experiences, or maybe you worked a marching band camp, or you play in a local community band, or you're familiar with that program in some capacity. Maybe you know a band kid or a choir kid in the program, or just something like that to kind of tie in and be able to make conversation. And then also to show, the people that you're interviewing with that you're very interested in the program, and you do have some personal connections and strengths that would tie into the program. So I would kind of look for, how does your experience tie into the program that you're interviewing for?
Great, fantastic. So this is a kind of different angle on this, and it's something that when I've done mock interviews with my students at the university, it's one of the first things I talk to them about, because our students in this culture are growing up in the social media realm, and a lot of things and a lot of their communication is through social media, through texting, through online social platforms, and it's really hard to get them to understand that line between the social, conversational, and the professionalism when they walk into an interview. And I'd love to have some feedback based on that. Is tips for the person that's sitting there going, am I going down that rabbit hole of being too social? Am I being myself? Yes, but am I being too social to the point that this doesn't feel very professional? Because that's a very, very fine line and could be a deal breaker in an interview. So let me throw that out there to the panel. Anybody that wants to take that, just some advice that you would offer. Yes, Gabe.
Yes, absolutely. I used to tell all my kids, seniors in high school, nobody ever got hired for what they posted online, but they sure have gotten fired for it. And I don't keep any, so I don't do Facebook. And that's just me. I'm not against it. My wife does it. But I'm really firm believer in be careful what you post. And if I would not be out there declaring allegiance to any political party one way or the other, because that may cost you a job. I mean, let's face it. So yeah, and then that's my thing. Don't if we're not going to be comfortable reading this on the front page of the Houston Chronicle, then don't post it.
Go ahead, Marcus. Yes.
Are you referring to inside interview itself?
Yes, itself. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I will say the one thing that is, as music educators, you have to consider is you represent an entire program, and you are the heartbeat of the school. Whether you realize it or not, you are. You have a huge shift in the culture of how students feel based upon your program. You have so many times, because you have long-lasting relationships with students, because it's a program that builds upon itself, whether it's 6, 7, 8 or 9 through 12. You see them all the time. You're with them, so families know who you are. All of those things. So when you're either the band director, the chorus director, the orchestra director, or pick one. You represent the school in a way that you don't realize. Parent, just as much as the football coach does. If your program is not adding value to the school, and it's taking away from it in a way that it hurts the culture and climate of it. And I said all that to say, that's what I think about when you stand in front of me. I got to think about how many different parents you're going to interact with, how many different personalities you're going to interact with. So when you're presenting yourself, you have to consider that you have to recognize that you represent so many different families at the same time you represent the school. So the parents have to trust you. They have to feel confident in your knowledge base. They have to have belief and trust in the fact that you're going to take their child and help them to grow in a way that they haven't seen before. You are a big piece of social and emotional learning for students in terms of how they find release or how they find solitude and whatever the case may be. So there's a lot on your shoulders. So when I look at you, I have to be comfortable. I have to feel safe. I have to feel like the things that you're saying is going to make me feel like when you're not around and I'm not around, that you're still going to represent the school well. So as you answer questions, and I'll take a liberty of saying this as well. Right now, when we're doing interviews, we're doing Zoom interviews. And as you can see in everyone's background, it's saying something about all of us, right? And I may be distracting the hell out of you right now based upon the pictures behind me. And so I'm judging you as I'm sitting in a Zoom interview, and I'm looking at you saying, okay, I wonder what that means. I wonder what aspect of this person am I going to get? And how far is what the words are saying to the environment around them, right? And so that's a nonverbal way in which you're being judged, and a way in which you're sending a message. So when you're sitting in a Zoom conference, remember, just pick your position purposefully. I would say that much, because you may want to tell a story behind you, just like I just did. This is purposeful. So your energy when you come into an interview, be mindful of the weight of the role that you're going into, right? So as you can project those things that are in you, and you need to be mindful of that, because in every question you're answering, you can use that to show sides of your personality that will give a good picture of a feel of who you are, versus going in on 10 trying to show how much energy you have, because this is an elementary school, so I need to be perky and poppy and pippy to poppy, and they're like, I hate this person. I can't deal with this person all day long. They're gonna be like this all day long. Or if it's you're trying to be so stern because this is a high school and this is a program where you have to be this, and that may not be the reason. That may not be the person they need, because the person they just let go was that person. So you have to come into it knowing that you need to show the complexity of who you are as a human being in how you answer questions. And that will show more of a balanced and professional aspect of who you are versus it being trying to be a type, because you definitely need to be you, but you need to show the complexity of you through your answers, which are rises and falls, versus I just need to come up with this attitude as soon as I come in the room, or I got to come in with this attitude as soon as I come in the room, or this attitude as soon as I come in the room. And I answer all the questions this way because I need to show how smart I am, because and that is going to make you project a personality that may not represent all of you, and then leave me with a taste or a particular feeling that makes me feel like you're too immature, or you're too strict, or you're too something that's going to push you out of the position because of you're trying to be too one way or another. So I that's the way I look at I am psychoanalyzing the mess out of you the minute you walk in that room, and how you interact for every question. So just don't overdo the one personality to be memorable. Be complex in every answer that you give to demonstrate the totality of who you are as you provide responses.
That's great. Chuck, I'm going to go to you next, because I know you deal with a lot of student teachers at the university. And how can you, after hearing what Marcus said and what Gabe has said about those aspects of it, how can you prepare a student, or how can a student prepare themselves for not doing that?
Well, this balance of professional and social is very important. And I think people forget that, we are all physical beings. And so how you present yourself outwardly reflects an inward attitude that you have toward an environment that you're in. So I've had interviews with people before. When I was at one of the middle schools I taught, I was actually a part-time administrator, and I got to interview some people for some positions in the school. And we had one young lady who came in who just came in off the track. She's a jogger. She was wearing a sweatsuit, all sweaty. So we knew she was an athlete, which is great. But she was interviewing for a music job. And it looked like she didn't think it was her outward appearance presented the attitude that she didn't really give a lot of value to the environment of the interview. She wasn't putting it as an important event in her life. She just ran off the track and came on in. So, but you can be professional, like Marcus was saying, and still be personable. You smile, laugh, be yourself, but that doesn't mean that you're not a business person who can get the job done. So you have to make sure you present yourself, because you're trying to sell yourself for the job, but you are also representing the community, you're representing the program, and you have to sell that to the community as well. You represent more than just yourself. So that balance of professional and social is really important, and a lot of it can be done quickly. Again, so much is summarized about you as a person by that first impression that you get, but sometimes that first impression can be wrong. For example, as you look at my little screen on your TV, you'll see 2 closed doors behind me. Okay. That means the other 6 adults in my house right now, one's at a music convention, one's teaching tuba lessons, one's a business major finishing her last week of her bachelor's degree. And I got this little room. So everybody's got their space for today, and we're all working. So I took the small space for their sake, but again, so much as we could wrap up about a person by how they present themselves, and you can still be professional and still be warm and congenial and smile and laugh and be that way. But you must present yourself in a professional way,
Perfect. Melissa, talk to us about, as a head high school director in a very large program. I know you have at least one assistant. You may have more than that, but what do you look for when you walk into that interview with the administrators, and you're thinking, I potentially could be working with this person? What are the questions that you're asking yourself, or the triggers that are going off in you that are both positive and negative?
Yeah, so I would say the number one thing, which I think we all know this, but maybe don't say it outwardly, is you're gaining family members. So I have an assistant director that's been with me 2 years. I've known him for a very long time. He happened to be one of my students in another program. So he knew what he was getting into. For us, like working together and obviously having a working relationship on like the next level, right? From, you know, student to colleague, but you're gaining family members. And I think the one thing that we sometimes forget as well is, I guess an advantage that we have as music teachers, especially if we have larger programs or have lesson teachers come in or different things, is we can build our environment to how we want it. And that's one thing I'm really cognizant of is when I'm bringing in new staff members here, whether they're choir, band, or lesson teachers, are they in I guess the same mind frame as my philosophy here at O'Fallon, which is doing everything we can to provide musical experiences that make kids better. Do they believe in that? Are they willing to work with us and do whatever it takes to make it great here? Do they have great experience? I also look for, besides personality, do they bring something new to the table that I can learn from? Are they doing something that I would not be able to provide? I have not put a tuba to my face in years, and you wouldn't want me to do that. I'm an oboe player. Great at that, not at some other things. Obviously there's, you know, music is so diversified. So I think of what other people can bring to the table as well, but do they gel with what we believe in philosophically? Would they be great with kids? Are they professional? Are they someone I would trust with my own child and all the band kids here? It's serious decisions, but it is, I would say, in a sense, you're gaining family members, and it's all the people that I've worked with along the way have made me better, and I have loved dearly. Everybody really throughout my career, I've learned like so much from, whether it's color guard instructors, believing in the program and teaching me to get out of my box and do some really cool things and be overly creative, to some of our top private teachers here, you know, of different things too. So I would say something like that. You're gaining family members, so you have to make sure that they, you know, coincide with what you believe, and they work with the school and the kids.
That's wonderful. Yeah, great viewpoint. So for our candidates that are sitting in the room tonight, typically after you finish with the principal, they might walk you down to the band room, and they might have you listen to the band rehearse or introduce you to the director, or even provide some time for you to sit in the director's office and talk to the director or the outgoing director. I've done that before. Or maybe you're going to be an assistant director and you have that opportunity to dialogue with them. So I'm going to toss to Susan, and she's going to tell us about the next segment of our production tonight.
Yeah, the next part, we'd like to know, how can people better prepare themselves in the music education area, just in general? How important it is, do you think, their preparation in terms of planning prior to the interview, their philosophy of music education, maybe some pedagogy questions? Some places they might not ask you about any pedagogy, and other places they might ask you about a lot, and how can you prepare? I'm also going to throw out a couple of questions that we've gotten from our participants. One was, panelists have discussed it's not good to bring in their portfolio, but should they bring examples of drill or budgets to show? And then one other person asked, okay, Dr. Broadhead was talking about sending recordings of their ensemble, but let's say they're a first-year person. Should they have recordings of their recital? Or what types of things should we maybe prepare to show their own musicianship if they can't necessarily show an ensemble yet? So we'll start with Chuck and Melissa and just kind of go around the room as well. In terms of music education, what do you want to see in terms of their ideas of vision and just physical preparation?
I had one student this past spring out of many who was asked to submit a musical recording of him playing music because he hasn't been a band director before. So he was asked to submit a recording of him playing some jazz music on his major instrument. He was asked to submit a recording of him playing classical music on his major instrument. And then he was asked to submit a recording of him playing something instrument that was not his major focus. And I thought that was interesting. I haven't seen that before. And I think Marcus mentioned that you ask students to submit musical recordings. Now, again, as Susan mentioned, if you were a band director before the interview, and you have an ensemble and lots of recordings you could submit, I'm not sure about the value of bringing in budget and drill charts at the physical interview. I just don't, do you want them to stop talking to you and look at those documents? I don't think you do. So again, that might've been before you were called into the main interview. If the student has not had a teaching position before, they have a recording of their a small excerpt of one of their performing ensembles at the university or a small quintet or something they could submit, but they're not going to probably listen to it at the interview, I think. The philosophy, as Susan mentioned, this is so important, and I think people just kind of fluff over it. If you take a look at your philosophy of education, you've probably written it down several times in your lifetime. It's a rather long document. It covers a lot of things. But when you talk to the panel about your philosophy, you want to summarize it quickly. Just hit the main points of your philosophy. But the reason why it's important that you communicate that is because that drives the bus. Every decision you make is based off your philosophy. The music you select, the way you recruit, the way you interact with parents, the way you interact with students, your behavior, classroom management system, everything is born from your philosophy of education. So when they asked that question, and again, on the list that I had compiled, there was probably about 7% of the questions were focused on philosophy of education. But those are important because they guide everything, all the decisions. So I'll just to summarize that up, just make sure you have your philosophy summarized in a few words, but very specific, and also have some, if they want musical examples, have something ready that you can send them that they give you after your physical interview or before. But I wouldn't bring it. Do you agree with that, Marcus? Not to bring it during the physical interview, the front to front, face to face.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. That's all I have.
Great. Melissa or Gabe?
Yeah, I've got just a few quick things that go along with what Charles was saying. I would, if you have a second interview or the walk down part to meet some of the other faculty that would be in your department, I'd make sure you know the program, because they're going to probably, talk to you and make some conversation. It may not be a Q&A like an interview, but you want to be able to respond and be invested in the program too. I know at times we've had some people interviewing for the program here, and they weren't aware about how many concerts we have or the marching program or different things like that, that they were, a little bit removed. And we want to make sure that, when you're interviewing, that you are like, I'm part of it. I'm aware. I'm invested. The other thing that I want to mention, just because I was on an interview committee about a month and a half ago, is we asked all the candidates about rep, or what composers would you play, or what's your favorite grade 3 piece, or things like that. It was for a middle school position. And a lot of people, and talking to them once the process was done, stumbled on that. I think we're not ready for presenting that, but that's our curriculum. I mean, of all the decisions that we make, which are thousands, right? We won't talk about that. That's probably another webinar. But it's so important. And so many people they pause, which I think it's great to pause so you can think and be articulate, but they just didn't really know how to answer that. And then some people already had that bag of tricks ready to go and talked about their favorite piece that they maybe did in a clinical experience, or something they did is maybe their first or second year teaching and how the kids loved it. And so that's something, because I know that I personally dwell on literature all the time. So we definitely want to think, as we're gaining a faculty member or someone into our program, that they have a knowledge base of WIN literature, which is ever changing. And then a couple other things, I would definitely have some videos ready to go that you could submit maybe right before the interview, so they could see you, another way to see you, besides looking you at Facebook or something like that. It's a small teaching episode, or you're conducting a little lab band or something. And I would also go through all your videos that you have, whether like their university college ones or first or second year teacher, and pick the best ones. Make sure it's clear, and they don't have to be very long, probably no more than 5 minutes. We just want to, grab a sample of you conducting or teaching or something like that. And then one last thing, one thing that I did, and one thing that I always do is I always write thank yous at the end of everything. I love writing thank yous. It's kind of a lost art. Obviously, you could always snail mail them, but you probably want to act on that quickly. But I would say as soon as the interview is done, shoot a quick email to everybody, maybe emphasizing some of your strengths or things you love about the program, and if there's anything else that you would need. But I think sending a thank you for their time and for you to come in is essential. And then anything on top of that would be maybe the video or whatnot. I know the position that I am in, I'll tell a quick little funny story. It's a short one. I know there were some other candidates that were really strong, and O'Fallon obviously has historically had a great marching program, and you kind of see the flags from well before me as well. But I wanted to kind of do a new take on the program and really develop the chamber side of things and concert band and some of the other aspects with the program. And so, but I know some of the other candidates maybe didn't have that same philosophy that I was aware of that were interviewing locally. So when the David Letterman top 10 list thing was a thing, I actually made a little top 10 list for myself of like why I would be great at O'Fallon Township High School. And I sent it to a couple of the principals. So it was a little funny, but it just reminded them of my strengths with the job. And then I think I sent a little video of me at a concert band festival as well. So that may have been overdoing it, but I really wanted to be here. I don't know if that made the deciding factor, but it just reminded them of things we talked about in the interview and things that I would love to do with the program as well. So, but remember, new people, thank yous go a long way. Everybody loves a thank you.
Awesome. I think that kind of brings us back to that marketing idea. How do you make yourself pop and be memorable in an interview? I shared last week, my daughter said, I wish that someone had told me in college that I was working on my brand from the very beginning. And we think about brands in general with Instagram now and all kinds of things, but it's really important for them to market themselves in an interview with a principal. So maybe if we could talk a little bit about that, maybe a principal who doesn't have a music background, and then also just situational awareness, being able to read the room. And if someone says something, should you react in one way, or how, you know, if that person is not being conversive, how should you react as well, and the personality types that we might run into in an interview. So if anyone has some things to add to that, we'd love for you to get started. Who wants to start?
I want to start, but
Marcus.
I want you to reiterate the root of the question that you're asking.
See, he's interviewing me now. Do you see this? He's a pro. I want us to talk a little bit about marketing to someone who might not be a music person. And a little bit off of what Melissa was saying. She did a top 10. I've never seen anybody do that in a music interview. And it was great. It made her memorable. So some things like that, and then how, in terms of their brand and how you would prefer them to market themselves to you as a non-musician. And then also how they can better be aware of the situation and making sure that they're hitting the nail on the head and being memorable.
Okay.
How'd I do?
That part goes back to everything that Melissa just mentioned is the root of what will make me remember you, is that you know enough about the school and you show me that you really want to be there. Because it says a lot more to me to know that you've done the research, you really understand the culture and the climate, you understand what's going on and how you'd be a good fit. And that top 10 thing was awesome. I mean, shoot, if I'm gonna steal it somehow. I don't know how I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna steal it somehow. But doing things like that beyond just a thank you, because it's typical. It's like the thank you is great. It's courteous. Do not do that, right? Continue to do that, because it says something about you in terms of just professionalism. But that extra step is what shows me as the person who's hiring you that you do really want this position beyond just saying, I want this position. Like you put a lot of thought into it, and this is a place that you really want to be. So, and then also I would say what would also help with how you respond after the interview is very important. And it would be smart to do something just before your interview started that would also put something in my head to say, okay, wow, this person is still thinking about it or has some idea about what they want to do and so on and so forth. So that would be one thing. The reading the room part would be that other point that I think Charles was making earlier, going on and on. Like you're going on and you're really standing on your pedestal of me, I, what I did. It's like, what about the kids? You know, how do you support the students? How do you support the program? How do you make but so if you get on that I thing, and you start noticing me falling asleep or me looking off, or the other person seeming a little bit, a little perplexed, because a lot of us have less of a poker face than most. So you'll see an expression like, somebody might drink some water. That's like, oh, you just messed up, right? So just shut it down, bring that last thought to a halt, because you're talking yourself out of the interview at that point. So that's one of the things you have to be mindful of. Am I talking myself out of the interview? And just give 1 or 2 examples of what made you add value in a way that was helpful to the school, helpful to kids, helpful to program, not just being your chest about how great you are. And I think that's one good way to market yourself and brand yourself in that moment by showing your value.
Great. Chuck, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to add to that. As far as marketing yourself, because you don't want to come off as a braggart, you know, and just like Marcus was saying, I, me. But I think if you focus on some really unique experiences that in your experience as a student prior to being a teacher, some unique opportunities that you took advantage of, that you really had to work very hard to acquire some skills that are unique to you that maybe other candidates don't have. I mean, I think focusing on those kind of skills that you have would not come across as bragging if you had to work very, very hard to skills. I would probably stay away from saying things like, this always came easy to me playing my trumpet or playing my trombone, and I never really had to. That probably wouldn't come across very, very well to an interviewer. So talk about the things that you really had to pursue and be diligent about, and helped you really acquire some unique skills that could benefit that community. As far as reading the room, if you're interviewing with a principal or another person who's not a music person, and you see their eyes are getting a little bit glassy, talking about embouchure and airflow and those kinds of things, they have no idea what you're talking about. There's so much we do that's common to all teachers. I mean, take that conversation and move it to scope and sequence. You can talk about lesson plan development. This is common to all teachers, pacing of instruction, classroom management. And so if you see you're losing your interviewer by maybe digging too deep into the music part, you could still turn that around and bring it to something they're comfortable with. Because if that principal doesn't think that you can make him or her feel comfortable in the interview, they're going to be doubtful if you can make students feel in your classroom. So you want to come off as professional and knowledgeable, but you have to also come across as someone who can make the people you're talking to feel comfortable in the room and being around you. Sometimes kids will join the band or stay in your band because of just wanting to be in your class, not because of the band content itself. So you have to make sure you present yourself as someone who could relate to people, build that relationship, and be aware if your interviewer is falling asleep or drifting off a bit. So, and you bring it around to things that are common to all teachers, because we all do that in the band room every day.
I'm sorry. You made me think of something. As far as reading the room is concerned, I usually interview with the content specialist. So Dr. Roden will be in the room, or it'll be someone else who knows your job, right? And knows the nomenclature, knows all the specifics. So if that person is asking the question, that's when you show off. That's when you know they show your content level. Because I will, that's my cue to tune out. Because I'm gonna, after you leave the room, I go, okay, Dr. Roden, was she on point or he on point with what they were talking about? Because that's where we get to the root of beyond the smiles, beyond the personality, is do you know your stuff? And it's great that you mentioned about showing about scope and sequence and growing students. That's helpful for me if you want to talk on both sides of the room, and that's why that's important. So I just wanted to mention.
Awesome, thank you so much. Gabe, did you have something to add before we go on?
Yes, yeah, I do. Which is, I think it's often appropriate to bring up why you're pursuing a career in music education. I've always felt like it was a calling, and we're all inspired to do this, and sharing that story. I think in my case always led me to what Charles said earlier about being able to articulate your philosophy, which I've done several in-services on. I think there are a lot of veteran teachers that have a hard time articulating their philosophy, because some of the things they'll do in their program don't necessarily go with what I think they're trying to accomplish in their programs. So to that end, I think for young graduates, being able to articulate in 2 sentences or less what your philosophy is very important. And that came to me because of the whole reason I got into the business, which was the junior high director I had basically saved my life from whatever it was going to become. And so that helped to guide me. And so I can tell you right now, my philosophy was education through music. So I'm not here to make professional musicians. I'm not here to make you a band director, or I'm here to help get you ready for life. And so that's easy to say. Whatever it is, if you can articulate it in a couple of sentences, I think that'll go a long way.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take, we've got a couple of questions real quick I want to address, because we're all talking about the interview questions. And there's a couple of them that are in the box right now. We're talking about situational awarenesses and reading the room, those kinds of things. But one of the questions is, and it's that check the box thing, that you never go to an interview without having questions for the person interviewing you. And one of the questions that came up is, how many is enough? How many is too many? And what should those questions be at the end of an interview as we're wrapping up here tonight? What should somebody look back on that interview, and how should they gauge the importance or the priority of their question if they have 2 or 3?
I would say three questions is enough. And sometimes in the interview, going into the interview, you may have received the answers in the questions in the conversation that you have. So that may strike a couple out. I think not so much how many, but the right kind of question. Sometimes you ask a question that shows me that you didn't do any research on the school,
Right.
or, so that'll mess you up. You say, oh, so how many students you have here? Like, any website information, don't ask that question. So, and a throwaway question that you shouldn't ask, it's because the interview is going to tell you about the process, like the interview process, how much time between now and then, and so on and so forth. You really use those time to ask questions that are like practical day-to-day questions that you probably have to find out on a job training type of moments, the things that will really, what will make you say, I don't want this job, or this is not the right fit for me. So ask that question, ask some things that will help dig into what will help you to see if it's a right fit. So I would say, think of those types of questions when you're asking those questions.
And I'd like to throw this out just to the room real quick. Do you agree that sometimes, or we've all done it, do you feel like you may be getting interviewed by the applicant sometimes to find out if they want to be, where they've been asked to go interview? Does that happen sometimes? So they're actually interviewing the position, not so much to find out whether they want to take that position or not.
Yes, that most certainly has happened before. And that would
Chuck,
be,
did you have
asking too many questions.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm going to add what Marcus said. By asking a question that could have been answered online, it's a red flag that you didn't do your homework. So I think you should wait. And I think you should wait to be polite until the interviewer asks you if you have any questions. Because usually they do that at the end. It's part of the planned process. So be patient, and then at the end they'll say, do you have any questions? And you want to make sure you have those ready. Something you can't find online, something like, for example, what kind of funding is available for the program. You wouldn't be able to go online and find that information out. So things that are specific and are important to the daily running of the program, but something that cannot be found online. And so there's only a few questions, or 2 or 3 would be plenty, but so much nowadays can be found online. So don't lose the fact that you didn't do your homework by asking, what's the school's state score, or what's the how many are in attendance, that type of thing. Do your homework and just ask a couple questions that are appropriate.
Does anybody else have any advice on that topic? Yes, Melissa.
I would say just real quick, and obviously I'm going to coincide with what Charles and Marcus is saying as well. But I would, before the interview starts, do all of your homework. Look on their websites, look on their school report card, investigate their music websites, maybe try to YouTube them, do all those things. And then write a list of things down that you could not find, gaps in the literature, we'll call it, if you were researching something, things that you would really need to know if you were going to accept the position. And then where you find the gaps within the interview, maybe it's 2 or 3 things, then I would be asking those. But definitely do a lot of research beforehand. Write some things down that you absolutely need to know if you're going to be accepting the position, and then where those don't fall in the information that you are receiving during the interview discussion process, and those are the things that you ask at the end.
Excellent. Well, oh, sorry, Gabe, go ahead.
I don't know if this is a thing anywhere else, but I know in some school districts here in Texas, they want you to live in the community, and maybe that's a fair question to ask if it's an expectation that you live in the school district, because sometimes you'll end up out in the middle of nowhere, especially out this way. So
that's a great point. Great point. So as we wrap up tonight, we've already talked about the SEL learning possibilities for this year, that a teacher is going to be much more than a pedagogue, that they're going to be an extended family member of sorts. We're going to be dealing with face-to-face. We're going to be dealing with online. We're going to be dealing with a lot of interaction with students like we've never had to do, and some separation from students like we've never done. For a student that's going, or for a attendee tonight that's going into their first year of teaching in very uncharted waters that none of us have even had to deal with, what would you recommend to them? What would be something that you say, keep your head up and this is the way you need to progress as far as being successful?
I can say something real quick because I'm living the dream. I'm not a new teacher, but it's this ever-changing roller coaster ride that we are living in. I would say probably number one is be positive, because as it's already been discussed, is you are looked upon as a music teacher as one of the leaders in the school. And so your demeanor and your outlook on things is going to have reflection on the school and the community and other people around you as well. So I would say just be positive. And I would say this is the time that we can be really creative. I have coming up with some things that are slightly crazy, bizarre, but I think will end up being very fun within the realm that we have and as it's evolving out. But it's an opportunity to do some things differently and maybe learn from it as well. So it's, music is worth it. This will be the biggest workaround that you will probably ever do in your career. But that's what we do as music educators. We're probably the best problem solvers in the school district. I mean, I think about all the crazy places I have taught elementary kids in custodians' closets and this and that. And I, thinking back on it, and I've done it, and we'll do it again. But we're great problem solvers. We always figure things out, but this is the time that we can be overly creative with how we do things and how we need to do things to keep things going.
I think the new teachers are going to need to be very compassionate and understanding with their students during this back and forth from online to face-to-face. Even at the collegiate level, I had several students whose parents work at night, and so they sleep during the day. So when we were having our online classes, which is a woman brass tech class, so a lot of it was performance, I had a student who couldn't perform on their instrument during the day because their father was asleep. And so I had to be flexible and say, okay, I'll contact you in the evening when your father goes to work and you can take that test then. And so the public school teachers are going to run into the same thing. What if they have a small sibling, a small infant brother or sister, and the parents are gone out of the home to work, and now that student of yours is the caretaker for an infant sibling? And so they can't do the things you need them to do when you need them to do it. So we have to be flexible and understand that there's other things going on in the lives of these students in their home, which is now their school. And we have to be sensitive to that. We just can't say it's now or never as far as us doing assignments or whatever. So be aware of that. Plus, some students may not have the hardware necessary to have these face-to-face classes like we need to have them. They might have a very weak internet signal, which causes problems. So you can be very flexible and understanding of these students and their needs, and again, like Melissa said, be creative and come up with new ways. In this environment, this COVID situation has forced me to come up with some new things I've never done before. And when we go back to normal, I'm going to continue with some of them because I think they're some cool ideas that are going to make my life easier in the long run. So even though we're forced to be right now in ways we never before, it's going to benefit everyone in the long run.
Gabe, if you'd like to wrap up as well, and then we'll go to Marcus. And
sure. Yeah, as band directors, we tend to be these incredible planners, many of us. I mean, like to the nth degree, right? I fortunately was never one of those people, but I hired a lot of them. And my point in that is that whatever plan you have for next week, you need to have a backup and a backup to that. And so a great friend of mine, great orchestra director, Jimmy Edwards, said to me early in my career, monitor and adjust, and call an audible when you need to call an audible. And so be flexible. That's all we can do right now is be flexible. We are creative, we are problem solvers, but just know that whatever it is that you've written up today in a week may be obsolete, and you got to go to plan B, C, and D with what we're dealing with. That's all I got.
Fantastic. Dr. Broadhead?
Never forget why you decided to take the job in the first place. Like why you went into this thing. As we all introduce ourselves initially, we're all long in the tooth educators about our histories and things that we've done. The business of education sometimes, the climate of education sometimes, all of these things are obstacles that to kind of push us away from why we felt the way we felt the first time we decided we wanted to be educators. And you have to not allow those other things to make you feel like this is not what you're supposed to be doing. It is a difficult job for everyone. You have a unique opportunity to do things that a lot of educators can't do, won't do, and won't be able to see until students graduate. You get to see students grow in real time. I want you to let that sink in. You get to see students grow in real time. The things that they're able to do on instruments are because of your support, your encouragement, your knowledge base, your commitment, who you are. And without who you are for this student, they would not have gotten to that point without what you're putting into them. And so it's super important. It's uber important to recognize how powerful your presence is in their lives, all of them. And if you ever forget that, that's what makes you, it makes you bitter. It makes you not in the right place to be. And it puts you in a position where you'll be slowly walking out that door, because it makes everything feel so hard to do, but you have to remember why you're doing it. So I can't stress that enough. You mean a lot to a lot of people. So everything that you do counts and everything that you do matters. You represent not only yourself, but you represent someone else that looks like you. You represent a group of people that people may have never met before. And you have to represent that weight. You have to understand it as a weight, but be comfortable in that weight because you're supposed to be there. And if you really invest in the people in front of you, as well as build capacity in yourself to support the people in front of you, then you're going to do, I guess, an insurmountable and exponential amount of things for students for a very long time. So you must always commit yourself to the reason why you got into this profession to begin with, because you are fortunate enough to be exponentially effective for students that you meet and you'll never meet because of what you put inside of them. So you have to remember that, because if you forget that, then you lose the light in you that is what we do as educators. It's hard, it's supposed to be. Dealing with people it's hard, it's difficult, but you're there for a reason and you need to fulfill that reason. I
think we all needed that pep talk. Thank you, Dr. Broadhead, for that. And that kind of takes us a little bit to what the philosophy of Music for All is. Its mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music for all. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic environment. I want to thank our panel, Marcus Broadhead, Melissa Gustafson-Hinds, Chuck Jackson, and Gabe Musella. I'd like to thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Be sure to check out the Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com for more information. Before we say goodnight, it's important for you to understand more than ever that in these uncertain times, we continue to impact Music for All, and we're extremely grateful for any donation gifts to our nonprofit organization. If you've enjoyed tonight's program, and in order for us to continue providing these free opportunities and advocacy materials, please consider giving to Music for All in any amount. Your gift allows us to serve our mission with future educational programming such as this webinar. Please visit musicforall.org/give. And finally, please join us not next Tuesday, but Tuesday, August 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central for our next episode of Mind the Gap. For Music for All, I'm Susan Smith, and my partner.
I'm David Starnes, back.
Thank you all, and good night.